they changed the
Yeah, I just switched over, and I lost all my viewers. 35 viewers. All right. I'm gonna try chat again. Do you see? I'm sorry, guys. I'm really trying to figure this out. I apologize. I know it's very annoying. We're trying to troubleshoot as it's on. Okay. No idea why it's not working. The only thing I can think of is to change my plan back to free, especially since these guys can't. All right, just bear with me one more minute. No, I don't want to switch. Okay. So I'm just going to have to keep asking questions. Just keep asking me questions by email. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Just muddle through it. You can't play.
Yeah, I know.
You can't try to keep fixing.
I know. All right. Okay. So RugVet, back to your question. Selective breeding. Selective breeding is when you choose to put two different things together. Obviously, they have to be the same species, but a dog that has curly hair. Nah, they wouldn't do it for curly. Doesn't shed, and then a dog that has a good personality, like a lab. So that's why they make those like labradoodles, so that you can have poodle hair, poodle dander. I guess poodles have hair as opposed to fur, I think. But then you have the lab personality, which is friendly. So they put them together, and they choose to put those two things together. So that's selective breeding. And that's a lot like what they do with vegetables. We talked about corn that is resistant to drought, but has a lot of fruit, which is the corn itself. Then it would be, that's selective breeding, where you choose to put two things together, same species, but different versions of the same species together in a lab, or you control it so that you get another organism that has the qualities that you want. Okay, let's see. So RMS, so a watershed is the area of land that the runoff is on. Yeah, that the runoff is on before it goes into the water. Okay, I answered Sharon's. Okay, I think I'm out of that email. Noreen says you don't understand the difference between what an aquifer is. So an aquifer is where we get water from underground. If you have a question about more than that, you should watch the video that is on Schoology, okay? But Noreen, it's where we get water from underground, and it's usually by a well. You do a pipe in there and you pull it out. But read the PowerPoint and watch the video. Okay, Joseph, the water table is the top surface of an aquifer. No, it is not the top surface of an aquifer. The water table is the height of water in the ground, not necessarily an aquifer. An aquifer is much deeper into the ground. So water table is just the height of water when you dig down. When you hit water, that's the water table. It doesn't necessarily mean it's in an aquifer, because remember, an aquifer it's running free-flowing water that runs through rock underground, and that is not what's at the top of the ground. So no, it's not the same thing. All right, Amy. Okay, that's not a question. Pore spaces. So pore spaces means the space in between the sediment. So the lab that I did on Friday, that was an example of different pore spaces. So the sand water went through much more slowly, but it did go through, than the gravel. And the pore spaces between the gravel is much bigger, which is the space between each particle. And there's a really good picture on the groundwater website. All right. What? Okay. All right. Manospi says, never mind. All right. I'm not going to answer that question. All right. What's the difference between runoff and watershed? And how do they work together? All right. So runoff is the actual water that goes into a bigger body of water. Watershed is the land. So runoff is the water and watershed is the land. Difference between genetic mutation, adaptation, and variation. Check the PowerPoint for that. I mean, I can go over it, but it's word for word in the PowerPoint. I really would rather go over things that are unclear as opposed to things that you haven't addressed yet. Because if Shweta, if you have a specific question, like you don't understand well, I guess they are similar. Yeah, all right. So I'll try to answer this. All right, so Shweta's question again is, what is the difference between genetic mutation, adaptation, and variation? So a genetic mutation is kind of a fluke, okay? So it happens by accident. It's not, there's no reason for it happening. It just, the chromosomes realign for some reason, and it's a fluke, not necessarily going to happen again, but that's what a genetic mutation is. And an adaptation is a change that results from things that are going on in that organism's environment that require them to change in order to survive. So remember, the definition of adaptation is traits or characteristics that allow an organism to survive and reproduce in their environment. So adaptation is very planned. It is something that happens over several generations. Adaptations don't happen overnight. It's not like all of a sudden there's a flood in Capel and any organism that needs to survive has to be able to swim. And so all of a sudden all these organisms have gills and fins and everything. It just doesn't work like that. It happens over several generations. So hang on. I have to look at the emails again. So genetic mutation happens in one generation from parent to offspring. Adaptation takes a long time. And variation is just what are the variations within that species, whether it's like fish, birds, like hollow bones in birds or things like that. So I hope that helps, Shweta. Let's see. Can I explain pivot joint and gliding joint? Yes, but it's not on the test, so I'm not going to. Because all it says for skeletal system is know the functions. That's all it says. So you don't need to know the joints. Let's see. So Noreen asked, are the functions of the digestive system absorption, giving nutrients to the body, and getting rid of waste? So it's actually breaking down food into smaller molecules, providing energy for the body, and getting rid of waste. That is the definition. Variance is a difference within a species, like Darwin's finches. Yes, Joseph, it is. Very good. So variance would be, yeah, and that's a much better example, Joseph, thank you. So variance is the different beaks of the finches that we talked about. And actually we did the bird beak lab where there were different shaped beaks based on the environment that the bird lived in. So that's a variation within a species. So excellent, Joseph, thank you. All right. Groundwater and aquifer. Is an aquifer just a group of groundwater? No. groundwater's on the ground, and an aquifer is deep underground. Aquifer doesn't sit on top of the earth. You have to dig a well. You have to go deep into the ground to get to an aquifer. It is not standing water. There is a big difference between groundwater and an aquifer. Excuse me. Can you go over the difference between pore space and particle space? It's the same thing. Pore space is how big the pores are. Particle space is the space between the particles. It's the same thing. Look at the groundwater PowerPoint, and there's a slide that says pore space, and it shows what it is. Water table is right under the bedrock, and surface water is above that. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to describe it, because the water table is I'm trying to think of a way to. Surface water is just water that sits at the surface of the earth, and it might not necessarily be the water table. So surface water could be because of rain and it made a big puddle. That's surface water. The water table would be consistent across, I mean, a lot of rain. Obviously the water table is going to rise, but yeah, I guess that's a good way to describe it. Okay. Oh, hang on, I'm waiting for the emails. Goodness gracious. Is there any way to remember genotype and phenotype? Every time I think of genotype, I think of gene and think that's the physical form, but that's not right. So genotype is the gene, it's the letter. It's the actual letter that represents that trait. Phenotype is the physical characteristic. So if we're looking at tall, as tall as the trait, the genotype could be capital T, lowercase t, like that. Or it could be capital T, capital T. That's the genotype. All right. The phenotype is what physical characteristic results in that genotype, and that equals tall. That's the phenotype, okay? So this is the phenotype, and that's the genotype. So genotype, I'm trying to do this mirror. The gene, and then phenotype is the physical characteristic, pH. Okay, this is exhausting. All right, functions of the nervous system and the reproductive system. I would rather, when you ask a question like that, you ask me what you think it is, because I really don't feel like me just giving you the answer is the best way to do it. So there's a question, what are the functions of the nervous system and the reproductive system? You can ask me if what you have is right, but I'm not going to sit here and just give you the answers to the review. So you tell me what you think it is, and I'll tell you if it's right. Shweta, is an aquifer a system of groundwater? No. No, no, no. Groundwater is on the ground. Aquifer is under the ground. What is the difference between a gene and an allele? Nothing. Allele is a gene. Oh, hang on, I'm waiting. On the test, it will ask, will it ask for overall functions of a system or what each thing in a system does? So the question on the review says, I opened it. Nope. I opened it. Here it is. So the review says, list the functions, for example, of the respiratory system. What you need to know are the functions of the respiratory system. It doesn't say know the different parts of the respiratory system and what they do. You need to know what the respiratory system does. That's as specific as you have to get. All right, hang on. What does it mean by variance in adaptations? Okay, so variance in adaptations is like the finches. So like Joseph said, finches adapted over a long period of time based on the food source that was available on their islands. So there was a variance. They adapted differently. Variety means to have different choices, right? So they adapted differently, and there's a variance within those adaptations. Finches are still the same species, but you have different adaptations within that species based on where they live. So there's a variance of adaptations or a variety. Like you go to a buffet, there's a variety of food that you can choose from. Same thing. Finches have a variety of adaptations based on where they live. Okay, an allele represents the gene in letter form. Yes, that's exactly right. The allele represents the gene in letter form. Okay, I just got a question. We need to know photosynthesis and cellular respiration? So that was not on the review. So if photosynthesis and cellular respiration isn't on the review, then it's not on the test. Period. Okay, brain, nervous, brain and spinal cord messages around the body. Endocrine controls body's daily activity, controls long-term changes, stages of development. Reproductive, your answer there didn't make sense, Katie. The asexual and sexual, that doesn't make sense. That's not a function, those are just words. So yes, your nervous system is responsible for sending messages around the body. Endocrine, you're right on, but reproductive, you missed on that one. Respiratory system's purpose is the gas exchange in the lungs. Yeah, but Joseph, tell me how more specifically you could put that instead of gas exchange. How else could you put that? Who was the scientist who went to the Galapagos Islands? Darwin. Charles Darwin. Okay, I think I'm caught up on questions. Okay, nope, Natasha. Do we need to know about Texas ecoregions? No. No, and was Texas ecoregions on the review? No, so it's not on the test. Hey, kid. Okay, so looking for more questions. Okay, is a volcanic eruption primary or secondary succession? I really wish chat was working, because one of the great things about chat was that you guys could answer each other's questions. So there are only 2 examples that we talked about for primary succession. They were glaciers and volcanoes, because what happens is the volcano covers everything in rock, and then there's no soil for plants to grow. So it is primary. And no, we don't need to know Texas ecoregions. All right, sorry, my emails get put into focused and other. No idea why. So now I'm going through the other. Heredity is the passing of traits from parents to offspring. Yes, it is. All right, aquifers are underground, and I assumed they got mixed in with dirt and sand like they did in the lab. So how come there are springs and geysers? The water is seemingly clear. It's a great question, Molly. First of all, when water is pulled out of an aquifer, it is filtered. So you know, you're always going to get sediment in water that's pulled directly out of a well. But what works as a filter is the rock that the groundwater is in. It actually serves as a filter as it comes back out. But that's a great question. Is selective breeding the animal selecting who to mate with, or humans putting animals together and making them breed? No, it's definitely not controlled by the animal. Selective breeding is where scientists decide. Sorry, my dogs are fighting or playing. I don't know what they're doing. Scientists decide what traits they want in an animal or a plant, and then they make it happen. The plants or the animals have no choice. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking for more questions. Oh my gosh. What is variance? I already answered that, Rohan. So if you didn't get that before, let me know. Please elaborate on the word watershed. I already did. So Pranav, if you don't understand that, let me know. Again, I wasn't able to see these emails before. Functions of the nervous system. Conger, I'm not going to answer that. You need to answer that on your own. All right. Okay, so those of you who told me that you're not able to ask questions, make sure you're emailing me. Let's see. Is CO2 an inorganic or an organic compound? Carbon dioxide is that one exception of a compound that has carbon in it that is inorganic. And it's the way the carbon and oxygen bond together. We don't need to get into it, but it is inorganic. All right, hang on. So those of you who said you could see and hear me, but the chat wasn't working, like Colin, make sure that you are asking questions by email, because that's the only way that I can answer them. Okay, how does pressure build up if there's already a hole in the ground for the water to come out? Good question, Chris, and it doesn't matter because that is not on the test. So I don't want to get into it and confuse anybody. All right. Mrs. Walsh, on the review it asked what time and soil is in ecological succession. I said that in primary succession it doesn't have soil and it takes more time. And for secondary it takes less time and it has soil. That's exactly right, Madura. We just put time and soil on there because we thought it would be helpful. Is a spring near ground level? A spring is ground level water. The definition of a spring is where water meets the ground. Is artesian wells only happen on a pressure-sided walls ground? In other words, the sides of it goes like this. So yes, because an artesian well, you have to have gravity, but you can't tell that from above ground. So it doesn't matter, okay? An artesian well, what you need to know, the definition of artesian well is that it comes out of the ground naturally without any sort of pump. That's all you need to know. Is quizzes anything like the final? It's multiple choice. The examples of organic compounds are lipids. No. Okay. No, that's not the example of an organic compound. The example of organic compound is any compound that has carbon in it, except carbon dioxide. That's it. Carbon dioxide is the only inorganic compound that has carbon in it, but that's all you need to know. Hang on, I'm just waiting for, okay. So Joseph said, more specific is the gas exchange in the bronchi between oxygen and carbon dioxide. So kind of, really what I was looking for is the respiratory system takes in oxygen, which our body needs in all of its cells, and releases carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. That's the definition of the respiratory system. Difference between a food web and a food chain is a food web is made of many food chains. That's it. You got it, KK. That's exactly what it is. All right, so reproductive system. The purpose of the reproductive system is to make more, whatever it is, dogs, horses, animals. It's to continue that species. That's the definition of the reproductive system. That's it. Is the adaptation of plants like cacti having a waxy skin so it can hold water in the desert? Yep, that's exactly right. What is the difference between both types of succession is time and soil, right? Yes, that's right, time and soil. Okay. Can I explain organic and inorganic compounds? Organic compounds have carbon. Inorganic compounds do not, except carbon dioxide. That's it. That's all you need to know. Oh my goodness, okay. What is the difference between, oh, I already did that. Inorganic or inorganic compounds, I already answered that. On the quiz on Schoology, it says that earthquakes is a catastrophic event that would least affect Texas, but I don't really understand that. Can you please clarify it? All right. Because of I didn't make the quizzes, but I assume that of the 4 choices that were given of the catastrophic events, that earthquakes were the least likely to occur in Texas. Yes, we've been having them. We haven't had any that have devastated an area, so that must have been the reason behind that. No, there will not be a Punnett Square question. Do you have to know a couple of organic and inorganic compounds? You need to know that organic compounds have a big C in them, except carbon dioxide. That's all you need to know. But remember, not C lowercase l or C lowercase o, just a capital C with another capital after it. Don't get confused by like Cl, okay, and C. All right, this is carbon. Whoop. This is chlorine. All right, well, looks like somebody else got in, but as I recall, that is one of my freshmen. I believe that's her, her whatever, login name or, okay. The exam, Punnett Square question, no. Food web is many food chains, yes. All right, looks like I'm caught up on questions. Let's see. That's so weird. I don't understand why I'm not getting any chats, but I guess it doesn't really matter. All right, let's see. Lichen and moss are 2 types of pioneer species, and then grass grows. Later on, the weeds and shrubs and other small plants grow. After that, trees and bigger plants, which is the climax community. Well, climax community comes when all the animals eventually come in. That's what a climax community is. So you have to have all the animals in there, as well as the animals. So climax community doesn't happen. Oh, sorry, Haley. Haley's a sophomore. She's almost a junior. Sorry. Okay, so I have a girl, it's not even in my class, able to chat. And 1 of 35 of kids that I actually have now that can't. What is up with that? Haley, I'm so glad you can chat in, but you're not in my class anymore. Okay, so climax community, you need to have the animals first. Then it's climax community. Yep, but that's, remember, think of a climax in a story. That's when everything kind of comes together. It's like the big part of the story. Do all organic compounds have carbon and hydrogen? On the notes, it said it must have hydrogen as well. Carbon, just carbon. Don't worry about anything else, okay? They usually also have hydrogen, but leave that alone. And Haley, miss you too. I hope you're doing well. Pretty cool how I recognized your username, by the way, I think. Okay, selective breeding, choosing parents so they can produce offspring of the same kind. No, selective breeding is choosing parents, or doesn't have to be, I mean, could be of a plant where you choose to put two kinds of the same species together to get your traits, desired traits. Let's see. Functions of the respiratory system to take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. That's exactly right. So then, does a good chain show the transfer of energy from organism to organism? Yes. It always shows the transfer of energy. And remember, the arrow doesn't go to who's eating who, but who gets eaten by who. And that's so that you know the energy. So how is water an inorganic compound? Well, water is abiotic. So remember, you're looking at a picture. Remember all those pictures that we did? And water is abiotic. It is not living. And organic means to be living. So water is an inorganic compound. Mind blown, apparently. Let's see. I appear to be caught up on questions. Don't forget that I will, your reviews are due the day of the exam. And you have to either upload them or do them on paper, but they're due when you walk in the door, not at the end of the day. So it would really be a bummer to end the 7th grade with a 0 in the grade book for something as easy as the review, you know. How would plants reproduce in selective breeding? Doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not going to explain to you the science behind selectively breeding corn. You just need to know that scientists can put two variations of the same plant together in a lab to make a selectively bred or genetically modified organism. So that's what GMOs are, genetically modified organisms, and you eat them every day because most things are genetically modified now. Okay, organic compounds examples. You can say anything from the biological sandwich. Okay, guys, you don't need to know carbohydrates, proteins, lipids. You don't need to know that. What you need to know is, and let's look again at the concepts, which I closed by accident. Hang on. Here they are. All right, let's see. Word for word, let's look at it. Okay, so I wonder if I can, if that'll work in the chat for me. Let's see. All right. I wonder if that'll, nope, that didn't work. Bummer. All right, I was hoping to show you the picture from the review, but what it says is know the difference between an organic and an inorganic compound, and be able to name some. That doesn't mean carbohydrate, lipid, protein. It means if you see something like, okay, I'm not going to do the subscript, C6H12O6. All right, so I just, C6H12O6, I just put that in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, because I don't know if you can see the chat. That is organic, okay? This is not NaCl. That is not organic. That is table salt. That's the difference between the two. You don't need to know the carbohydrate lipid thing. Absolutely not. Okay? All right. Are you going to put a submission on Schoology for the review? I already did. Can you explain more in depth why gray matter and white matter is? No, because it's not on the test. Nervous system. What does it say for that? Where is that? Here we go. Nervous system. Lists the functions of the nervous system. That's all it says. You don't need to know white matter and gray matter. What does the nervous system do? That's it. That's it. Function of the digestive system. Breaking down through food, absorb water and nutrients, eliminate waste. That's it. KK, you got it. That is the definition of the digestive system. Time and soil. Does that mean soil is formed by lichens and moss over time? No. Tommy, time and soil is means those are the two differences between primary and secondary succession. We put those on there as a helpful sort of reminder. The difference is time. Primary takes way longer than secondary. And soil, primary doesn't have soil. Secondary does. Secondary soil. That's the difference between the two. Live stream will be accessible. Yes, I'm going to, once I stop recording, then it'll be available on YouTube once it uploads. It might take a couple of minutes to upload, but all right, let's see. So any other questions? I know we got cut short a little bit because of the mess ups, so I'll stay online till 8:15. But so let me do some talking about the test. I know a lot of you are uptight about it, and that's okay. I completely understand that because you're in 7th grade, and this is the first time, well, you took midterms, but I know it's overwhelming to have a bunch of cumulative exams. It's good practice. It's something you have to get used to, unfortunately, because it's going to keep happening to you in high school. I know they do exemptions, but it's my understanding that the exemptions are going away. I could be wrong. Hang on. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's my understanding. And as a mom, I know that I loved it when my kids were exempt because it was one less thing for them to stress out about. However, when they got to college, it's really a disservice because when you get to college, there's no exemptions in college. Like you have to take a test, and sometimes you have a class where the only 2 grades you have are midterm and a final. I mean, I hope for your sake you don't end up in a lot of classes like that because that's a drag. Because if you mess up, you don't have a lot of ways to redeem yourself. But that's the reality of college. So as an educator, I wish they would get rid of exemptions. As a mom, and as a student, I probably would have liked to have exemptions. They didn't have them when I was in school, but so I get it. You guys have to get used to doing this cumulative exam stuff. It's just reality. So in talking about the test, it is multiple choice. Okay, like I said, GT has 50. I just happen to have it right here. 54 questions for GT, 50 for honors, 45 for on level, I think. Remember, you have 100 minutes or something to answer or to take the test. So you have plenty of time. So I'm just going over the questions. They're really, like I said, we are not in the business of tricking learners. So we are not going to put something on the test that isn't on the review and say, well, you should have known. Like, we're not going to do that. So for the skeletal system, if it says on the review, know the 5 functions of the skeletal system, that's what you need to know. I'm going to look for skeletal system questions. Let's see. And I'm going to make sure I'm right, because that would be bad. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but hang on. All right, so looking for them. They're not on the first few pages. Okay, so I'm looking at a question that has a bunch of descriptions of different systems on it. And as long as you know what each system does, and you can tell the difference between one system and another, that's how those questions are covered. All of the questions, there's a bunch of questions that's just comparing the systems to each other. It doesn't say, and what is the difference between a pivot joint and a gliding joint? I promise you, if it's not on the review, it's not on the test. And if you find a question on the test that was nowhere on the review, you tell your teacher. Because we are, like I said, we are not in the business of trying to catch you guys at something. Yeah, that really, it is, there are no sneaky questions on here. I mean, the 3 of us wrote the test, Coach Wilson, Miss Aguirre, and myself. They're all very straightforward. There's some questions about genetics, and you need to know what, for example, if it's capital S, lowercase s, is that dominant or recessive? Or, I mean, you need to know that stuff. There's a lot on here. I can tell you there's a lot on here on ecology, because we didn't take a major test on ecology. If we did, it was just a quiz or something, because there's questions on here on weathering, erosion, and deposition, food chains, food webs, energy pyramid. So, you know, which level of the in the energy pyramid has the most energy, that kind of question. Examples of primary and secondary succession. What are pioneer species? You need to know what a niche is. Niche, not a niche. Sounds cooler, but it's a niche. What are, you know, the levels of organization? So you need to know specifically, not to subatomic particle, but organism, community, no, organism, population, community, ecosystem. You need to know those. Herbivore, carnivore, autotroph, heterotroph, abiotic and biotic factors, producers. What is an aquifer? Diversity of offspring. You need to know that too. How can you, what sort of situations will lead to very diverse offspring versus not? Remember the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction. So when it says being able to name some organic and inorganic compounds, all that means is you have to be able to look at a compound and say whether it's organic or not, okay? So inorganic compounds do not have carbon. Standing by itself, carbon, not capital C, lowercase o, not capital C, lowercase l. carbon, except carbon dioxide. That is the difference. It has to do with how the carbon and the oxygen bond together. You don't want to know the details, I promise you. I don't even know if you go into that much detail in 8th grade. You definitely do in biology in 9th grade, but just know that carbon dioxide is the only exception to the rule. So if you look at a list of molecules, and you can say, of compounds, sorry, you can say that one's organic, that one's not. Why? Because that one has carbon and that one doesn't. That's it. That's all you need to know. Okay? Don't overanalyze it. And don't be tripped up by a carbon dioxide question. All right, so I have 6 more minutes. I'm going to look for some more emails. All right. I think, because we learned a lot from you and some of it is not on the test. Okay. Yeah, I know. That's true. Shweta said she thinks people are asking if it's on the test because you learned a lot and not all of it's on the test. That's true. And when we were writing the test, we felt, because we tested you over all the body systems, that we felt that you needed to know the overall purpose of the body systems. But beyond that, we didn't want to test you on it again, which is why it seems like we spent a lot of time on body systems, but it's not on the midterm, excuse me, on the final. And that's because it was so while ago. Okay, food chain decreases by 10% each time it transfers. Okay, not exactly food chain, Deepa, it's on the energy pyramid. So, but yeah, I guess food chain, I guess it could fall into that same category. So let's see. So as you go up the energy pyramid, so here's producers, and then let's say this had 1,000 units of energy. All right, 1,000. Then this next one is 10% of 1,000, not 10% less, 10%, which would be 100. So producers would have 1,000, first level consumers would have 100, and then 10, 1.1 as you go up. So 10% of, not 10% less. So good question, Deepa. All right, let's see. Niche is the organism's role in an environment. Exactly right, KK, that's all it is. All right, will you please clarify natural selection? So natural selection is like survival of the fittest. Nature decides who's going to survive and who's not. So if an organism has qualities, strategies, traits that are conducive to surviving and reproducing in the environment, then it'll survive. If an organism does not have, for example, camouflage, so if an organism in an environment that is like in the woods where there's green or just kind of brown colors everywhere, and the organism is like bright blue or something, chances are that's not going to survive. So nature is going to survive, or is going to decide whether that organism survives. That's natural selection. Nature decides who lives and who doesn't. And that's, so it's survival of the fittest is another way of saying natural selection. Niche is an organism's way of life. Yeah, it is, but a better definition of a niche is an organism's role in the environment. So 2 more minutes, but my recommendation for the test, you're going to have a class, you're not going to do a class copy, we're going to have a hard copy. So you can use all your test taking strategies. And I know that you have a lot of tests. Some of you have 2, maybe 3 tests on the same day. That's also something you have to get used to, because in high school and college, it's kind of luck of the draw, depend on what period you have your classes. But I really suggest you use those test-taking strategies. So remember, it was, oh my gosh, it's going out of my head. Like What's the mnemonic for science? Oh my gosh, I'm tired or something. I don't remember. But oh, I'm actually I'm complete brain fart as to what ours is called. Okay, I don't remember. But anyway, go read every question really carefully. Make sure you know what the question is asking. Okay. If you're not sure, read it again. You have plenty of time for the test. You don't get extra credit for turning it in early. Cross off the questions the answers you know are wrong. Underline words within the question that are important. If you feel like you need to skip it, make sure that you circle it on your test and that you go back to it. Also, maybe make a mark off to the side on your bubble sheet because we're going to do the Mastery Connect so that you can, first of all, so that we're not trying to grade 150 tests before Thursday when the last day of school is, because that's when we have to have our grades in. But put a little mark on the side of the bubble or something so you know to go back to that question. And just make sure that if you skip a question that you don't put the next question in that spot and then you get to the end and you have one left over and you're like, I don't know what happened. So some people, answer the question, then go and bubble it right away. Some people answer all the questions and then go back. Whatever your strategy is, it doesn't matter. Just have a strategy. Don't get all worked up about the test because there isn't any new information, like stuff you haven't heard before. Take advantage of reviewing. I know if you have science first or second period, your test is first thing. But if you're going through your review and you have a question and you weren't able to ask the question on this tutorial, email your teacher. Or you're going to have time for clarification first thing when you come in on before your test. So ask the teacher then. Call a friend. Ask somebody in class that you know would know the answer. Unfortunately, that might not always be your friend. You may have to call somebody that you know for sure would know the answer. So reach out, get help, study, and spotlight. That's what I always say when you go through your test. Red, yellow, and green. Start with green and put a green dot next to every single question. I got this. I don't have to study this. I will just in case, but I'll watch it. I'll study it if I have time. Yellow is, well, I think I know what this is asking. I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure, but, and then red is, I don't even remember learning about this. So then when you have to prioritize what you're going to study, you start with the red. If you have time, you go to the yellow, and if you have more time, you go to the green. But always start with the stuff that you don't know or that you're least familiar with. So like I said, you can email me questions. My daughter's arrival home is delayed today because they overbooked her flight, which makes me sad. But so instead of coming home tomorrow at 4, she's coming home on Tuesday at 4. So I might be a little bit more available for questions, but definitely reach out to your friends. And if you have any questions, ask your teacher. So I'm going to check one more time for emails. Is the channel called ASAP Science? I have no idea what question you're answering, Ventura, so I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to upload this to YouTube. Sorry about the mess in the beginning. I really thought that if I upgraded to premium that it would help, and it didn't, so I apologize. And have a great weekend. I love you guys, and I'll see you Monday. No, Tuesday.